Hi there, guys. Welcome to yet another session of Daily Word Web. I'm your coach Anupam Mishra, and in today's session, मेरे बारे में और introduction या credentials आपको जानने हो तो आप session के episode के end में देख सकते हैं, right? Right now, I'd like to get into the topic right away. देखो, so in today's word web, we'll be looking at today's word web will be dealing with the root animus. Okay, and animus stands for mind or soul or breath, and which reminds me of a beautiful poem which was written by Sir Rabindranath Tagore, जिसका title which was originally I think composed in it was originally compiled in Bengali, but बाद में उन्होंने उसको English में भी translate किया था, and the title went something like this, where the mind is without fear. And basically in this poem he basically he talks about his vision of a free India, and this was way before independence. I think 1916 या 1912 में उन्होंने ये कविता लिखी थी, first in Bengali and then he translated the same into English. Anyhow, so enough about that. Let's move on to the vocabulary part. Okay. एपिसोड के फ्लो का सवाल है. आई थिंक आप लोग जो लोग एपिसोड देखते हैं आपको ऑलरेडी पता है, सो यू कैन डायरेक्टली स्किप दिस पार्ट. वो आप खुद से समझ जाइएगा. आई स्टिल नीड टू रिकॉर्ड दिस फॉर द न्यू लर्नर्स हु माइट बी वाचिंग दिस, एंड फॉर द न्यू गाइज, पीपल हु आर वाचिंग दिस फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम. सी इट्स प्रीटी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड गाइज. एपिसोड फ्लो में मैं आपको नेक्स्ट स्लाइड में आई टेल यू अबाउट द root information about the root कि उसका origin क्या है, meaning क्या है. Then we'll go into the gist of the episode जहाँ पे हम लोग will study about words that come from this root. Okay, and then finally we'll look at these words in action as part of sentences. एक छोटा सा टेस्ट देंगे उसके बाद आप, और बाद में summarize करके हम लोग इसे close करेंगे. Okay, so let's start with the root info part, right? So root info में the root that we have at hand today, which is animus. Okay, and it's a very interesting root. आप देखेंगे आज काफ़ी interesting terms in words आज हमें जानने को मिलेंगे, and it derives from the Latin language, and it stands for mind, soul, and in some cases it also stands for breath. Okay, a variation of this particular root also stands for breath in some cases. Other roots which have a similar meaning would be psyche. It's something that we covered in episode number, I think this is 6, right? This is 6 one. So episode number 5 में हमने ये cover किया, तो अगर आपने वो नहीं देखा तो आप जाके देख सकते हैं. ठीक है. So let's start with the words, guys. Okay, there was one word. If someone were to ask me कि यार आपके जो भी आपका एक्सपीरियंस रहा है उसमें अगर एक शब्द आपको पूछा जाए कि which is your favorite word, in all of these vocabulary sessions that you have taken across platforms, like which is that one word that is really your favorite, or maybe that represents a quality that you really admire. ठीक है, जिसको like quality that you admire and you'd like to inculcate, or you'd even advise other people to inculcate, right? ऐसी कौन सी quality होगी, ऐसा कौन सा शब्द होगा अगर मुझे पूछा जाए, तो in that case my answer will be very straightforward, very simple. It would be this word. The word is equanimous. What does equanimous mean? Equanimous means the state of being calm, composed, and even tempered. Okay, it derives from your roots. The first part of the word derives from the root aeqws, that's which is the Latin term for equal. I think we have discussed this root in passing earlier, right? Equal. And the later part, obviously, animus derives from animus, which means mind or soul, right? So someone who's of an equal mind, or someone who's of who behaves, who despite the kind of situation that they confront, okay, the situation that you might face in life might be positive in nature. हो सकता है कि जो हालात आप फेस कर रहे हैं वो आपके अनुकूल हो सकते हैं, या फिर वो आपके प्रतिकूल भी हो सकते हैं, right? There's some Hindi vocabulary coming your way there, by the way. So the situation that a person might face in life can sometimes be, well, positive. It can be a situation where they are celebrating something, where they have achieved something, where they are really happy about something, or it can also be negative in nature, right? It can be an adverse situation, right? However, a person who's equanimous, who's considered to be equanimous in nature, would not get excited by the positive situation, and would neither get disheartened or disappointed by the negative situation. Their reaction to both these kind of situations will be the same. They'll be of an equal mind, they have an equal temperament, जहाँ तक कि इन सब हालतों का सवाल आता है, right? So this reminds me of a wonderful scene from a great movie Kung Fu Panda. I'm sure आप लोगों ने देखी होगी शायद. उसमें I think there's a part where Master Oogway, if you've not seen it, please make a plan on the weekends and go watch it. So Great movie, very inspiring and very motivating, and some really great messages in there. So anyhow, getting back to the word, so there's a scene in there. उसमें एक particular scene है जहाँ पे what Master Oogway, who's a tortoise, who he calls Shifu. Shifu is also one of the teachers, but the main teacher or the main master is Master Oogway, right? And Shifu is under his command, I guess. So Master Oogway calls Shifu and says that there's something urgent here. I need to talk to you. He has sent a messenger, and then Shifu arrives, and then he asks him कि हाँ, so Master Oogway, आपने बुलाया मुझे, right? So कहीं कुछ कोई दिक्कत तो नहीं? And then after doing all of his wordplay, Oogway tells him that well, I've had a vision कि एक मुझे एक vision आया है जहाँ पे Tailang, now Tailang is basically, I think, the villain there, right? The antagonist there. He says that he has had a vision that Tailang is going to return, right? The villain जो किसी जेल में किसी कैद खाने में जिसको बंद करके रखा गया इतने सालों से, वो वहाँ से निकल जाएगा, वो ऐसा विजन आया उनको. And then on hearing this, Shifu is like goes bonkers. He's totally agitated. He's just roaming around here and then. He calls for some sort of bird messenger, and he says that okay, you just go to that particular prison and ask the people to double the guards, double the security, and double everything. And then that's when Oogway in fact mentions two very wonderful lessons. उसमें से एक ही lesson मैं आपको यहाँ बता रहा हूँ because the second one is not relevant. उसमें एक जो lesson होता है, he basically says that because he observes how agitated Shifu, the teacher is, and he tells Shifu that when your mind is agitated, right, when your mind is too excited or too worried, if it's too agitated, it becomes your mind is like water, right? He uses that analogy कि आपका दिमाग एक पानी की तरह है, right? Your mind is like water, my friend, and when it is agitated, it becomes very difficult for you to see anything, right? But if you allow it to calm down, okay, if you just can maintain some composure, the answer becomes clear. So the quality that probably Oogway was talking about there was equanimity, right? And in adjective form it will be equanimous, right? So yeah, so much for the story. Anyhow, so equanimous is the word for that. There are other terms for this. There is इसके लिए और भी काफी interesting terms है, by the way. Another term for equanimous would be equable, right? An antonym for this word, for equanimous or equable, would be like a person who's equable or equanimous is in nature is a person who is not irascible. Okay, an irascible person is simply a person जो बहुत ही आसानी से irritate हो जाता है, right? Who's someone who gets irritated. Irritable is another word for them, right? So a person who gets irritated very easily, or who can be considered as irritable or irascible. Okay, so these will be your antonyms for equanimous and equable. By the way, please do not confuse the word irritable with the word irritating. Okay, so if there is a person who gets irritated easily by anyone, in that case the word you'd want to use would be irascible or irritable, right? जो हर किसी से आसानी से irritate हो जाता है उसको आप irascible या फिर irritable कहेंगे. Okay. However, a person who irritates others, जो बाकी लोगों को काफी बार irritate कर देते हैं, they will be considered as irritating in nature. Okay, so that's the difference. Please understand the difference between irritable and irascible can be used interchangeably, but irritating would be different. Okay, so yeah. Anyhow, let's move on to the next word, which is magnanimous. Okay, now magnanimous, obviously the second part derives from animus, which means mind, soul, breath, etc. The first part of the word derives from the root magnus, M-A-G-N-U-S, which is a Latin term that stands for great, G-R-E-A-T. I'm going to write on the web, please. I hope it is legible. G-R-E-A-T, great, right? So magnanimous is a person who's really large-hearted, who's very generous, who's very forgiving and kind, and is very might be someone who's prone to doing charity, right? So maybe not necessarily, but sometimes even at their expense, right? So maybe some philanthropists can be considered to have a magnanimous disposition, right? So जो कि बहुत ही बड़े दिल वाला है, if you talk in Hindi, so that would be magnanimous, someone who's who's well, who has a very well agreeable soul, right? Not great soul to kuch nahi hota, but you understand the logic here. So that's what a magnanimous person would be. By the way, from Magnus, there's another expression that we can learn, which is magnum opus. I'm not sure if you must have heard of this, right, somewhere. So magnum obviously comes from great, but opus is another term, is another Latin term that stands for work. Okay, so magnum opus would basically be, let's say, in case of an artist, would be their greatest work, would be the greatest piece of artwork of their lifetime, right? For example, well, although Da Vinci did many great paintings, but some might consider Mona Lisa to be his magnum opus, or in case of the writer of Sherlock Holmes, who was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, they might consider the series of books or the series of stories on Sherlock Holmes to be his magnum opus, right? To be the greatest work of his lifetime. तो वो उनका magnum opus माना जाएगा, ठीक है? OPUS. Okay, so that's magnum opus. By the way, there's a antonym for the word magnanimous, and the antonym is pusillanimous, right? I'll write it down for you. Pusillanimous. Pusillanimous. Obviously, animus comes from the same root, animus as mind and soul, and the first part of the word comes from the root P-U-S-I-L-L-U-S, pusillus, that stands for something that is very small, okay? Something that is very diminutive or small, okay? So a pusillanimous person is a person, like as opposed to a magnanimous person, is a person who lacks courage, who's not determined, you know, who's very timid, right? Very fearful. आसानी से डर जाएगा, आसानी से हार मान लेगा, right? Someone who might in turn, and as a result of this, might also turn out to be greedy, right? So like all the qualities that would be opposing to a magnanimous person would be a pusillanimous person, right? So yeah, that's about pusillanimous for you. Let's move on to the next term, which would be inanimate. Okay, now, well, by the way, before we discuss inanimate, let's also talk about the term animal. Now, this is obviously not a new vocabulary for you. Okay, so animal, we all know what animal means. But what is interesting here, that animus, certain variations of this root animus also stand for breath, right? So animal is basically any creature or any entity that breathes, that is alive, that has a mind or a soul, right? That's how animal derives from animus. Okay, and then now you can try to understand the meaning of inanimate, right? An inanimate object or an inanimate entity would be something that is not alive, something that does not breathe, does not have a mind or a soul, right? Like for example, a table or a chair or maybe any non-living entity, right? Can be considered as inanimate, right? So that would be the meaning of inanimate for you. Next, apart from inanimate, although see, this doesn't necessarily have to be used exclusively for non-living entities. आप इसको तो और भी context और भी संदर्भ में इस शब्द को use किया जा सकता है. For example, you must have seen these. आपने YouTube पे videos देखे होंगे या फिर आपने you must have come across these artists. You know, these street artists who almost pose like a statue. You know, they don't alter their position. वो एक ही कोई at some crossroads or something, they'll on the footpath or somewhere, they'll stand almost like a statue. You know, and like that's their art, that they can stand for a long time without making any movement, right? So yeah, hence one can say that the street artist was so good that hardly any passers-by were able to realize that he was actually a person and not an inanimate statue, right? So inanimate means something that does not have, does not breathe, something that is not living, something that is, well, not animated. Okay, so that's inanimate for you. Anyhow, by the way, from animate and inanimated, there's another. You must have heard of animation, right? I'm sure. Now, animation is basically when you have images. For example, this part here, this can be considered a very basic version of animation, right? These sparks going up from this fireplace, and you can see the fires here. So there's some animation that we've done here in this video. So animation is basically when you have things move about, right? When they behave in a manner that would be considered equivalent to an animal, right? Because animals generally move. So animation. So that's how animation derives from animus. Anyhow, chalo. Let's move on to the next term that we have at hand here, which is unanimous. Okay. Now, guys, unanimous is something that derives from. Wait, let me get a different ink here. From another, obviously, the second part of the root derives from animus. The first part of the root is unus, which is a Latin term for one, right? So unanimous literally would mean of one mind, okay, and then it generally relates to the consensus, okay, or agreement between all the people involved in making a certain decision, maybe, right? So let's say you have a jury, okay, जहाँ पे बहुत सारे लोग हैं. So if all of them have the same opinion, if all of them happen to have the same opinion, right? In that case, you would say that, well, they have come to a consensus by unanimous. They've come to a unanimous decision, right? They've come to a unanimous decision with respect to, well, let's say convicting the alleged murderer or not convicting them, right? So that would be unanimous. That would be the term here, that it can be used in that manner. Talking of unanimous, let's say मान लीजिए अगर यहाँ पे agreement नहीं होता है, and let's say one of the jury members starts criticizing the stand that another jury member took, okay, and then the criticisms become very harsh. Then what is the term that you can use in such case? But the term is, apart from criticism तो आपका already एक term है, and there is also censure. Very harsh criticism can also be considered a term for very harsh criticism is also censure. Like they are censuring the other jury member कि नहीं आप कैसे बोल सकते हो कि वो convict है, etc. Why are you not considering this evidence, that evidence? Okay, so but apart from the word censure and apart from the very cliched word criticism, there's another word that can be used here, and the word is animadversion. animadversion. Okay, and animadversion derives from, well, three roots. The first is obviously anima, all right, anima coming from animus. The second is ad, that stands for two, and the third is vert, right, vert. Version comes from vert, which stands for to turn, right? So you can think of, like, you consider anima separately and consider the word adversary separately. Who's an adversary? An adversary is a person who's your opponent, right? Who's your enemy, right? So an adversary would be a person who turns, and then the way you can try to understand the meaning of adversary, well, how does the etymology of adversary relate to its meaning? Etymology के हिसाब से क्या है ये? To, someone who turns, right? Ad is for to, and adversary comes from vert, which is for to turn, right? So adversary would mean someone who would turn the situation against you, right? That would be an adversary. That would be an opponent. That's how you can relate the meaning of adversary with its etymology, right? To vert. And similarly, an animadversions are basically comments or remarks that turn the situation against the other person, right? Anima here in this case refers to the first person, right? And the animadversions, the remarks that are being cast by the second person would be considered as the animadversions towards the first person, right? So the person is casting criticisms, right? Adversions towards, well, the first person, the mind and soul of the first person, right? So sometimes it can also be personal in nature. So that is animadversion. Although this term is not used very frequently, but it's a useful term to know. So yeah, so adversary we know animadversion, and I think that's about it so far as today's session is concerned. Adversity is another word. Adversity would be about a person, and adversity would be about the situation, right? And adverse situation which is जो आपके प्रतिकूल है, which is not in favor of you, right? That will be an adverse situation. So yeah, so that's about the words today, guys. So coming to the sentences, guys, the first one, the external environment and events will be what they will be. It's how I choose to relate with them or process them that determines whether I'm I remain equanimous or not, right? So that's the external environment or events might be positive or negative in nature, but how you choose to relate to them, that determines whether you're equanimous or not, right? So on the same lines as we discussed in the previous part. Next, for instance, he seems to think that the kids are entirely my responsibility, and anything he does with them or for them is a magnanimous favor for me, right? So obviously there is some sarcasm involved here on part of the writer, right? So magnanimous, in this case, obviously means like a huge favor, something that he has done almost like a charity, right? So like a big deal or something. So yeah. Next, in less than 2 decades of their use, the synthetic pesticides have been so thoroughly distributed throughout the animate and the inanimate world that they occur virtually everywhere, right? So the animate world would refer to the flora and fauna. Flora is for plants. Well, they can be considered animate as well. They grow, right? They do move, and the inanimate world would be like everything else apart from the living things. So yeah. So he's like in this case, the writer is talking about an environmental issue, right? As you can understand. Next, you never get unanimous consent. That means complete consent. Like it says that every member who was involved in the voting process has given the same opinion, has given the consent around design. So what does this the sentence says that you never get a unanimous consent around design. People bring their opinions, she said, right? So that means so far as design is concerned about any object or any project or endeavor, you'll never get a unanimous consent. Like everyone will have their own opinion, right? So there'll be never a case जहाँ पे सब लोग एक ही बात मान जाए. So yeah, that's the usage of unanimous. As usual, you can solve this exercise and put it in the comment section. You can also there's also a Google form link available, where you can answer where you can complete this exercise, guys. Okay, so yeah. Finally, guys, here's the summary, short summary of the roots and words that we discussed on a primary as well as secondary basis. You can pause the slide and go through each of these and try to recall and try to see if you recall the meaning. Okay, so. Okay guys, so finally about myself, I'm Anupam Mishra and I'm Lucknow alumnus. These are my areas of work and these are the brands that I've worked with in the past. I have also worked as an educator in the past with an academy, and I was recognized by the Johnny Ive Award and considered arguably as the best VRC educator that they had. And well, these are my CAT credentials, and we are a growing channel right now at this moment, and we need all the support that we can get. If you find our content, अगर आपको हमारा content, हमारा delivery, ये सब चीज़ें आपको अच्छी लग रही हैं, तो definitely इस वीडियो को share करें with all those people, with all the learners and students जिनको ये helpful हो सकता है, who might find this interesting, and do consider subscribing to the channel and liking the videos, so that like it might seem like a very small thing on your part, but it goes a long way. It plays a major role when it comes to an upcoming brand like Sluggers. So yeah, so that's about it, guys. I'll see you in the next session.